You are listening to MCC Votes&Seats, the podcast series of the Center for Political Science of Mathias Corvinus Collegium. We provide election insights with experts and politicians.
Welcome to everybody. This is the MCC Votes&Seats podcast. I'm Kálmán Póca, head of the Center for Constitutional Politics at MCC. And today we will talk about the German elections held on 26th of September. We will analyze the causes behind the results and talk a little bit about what to expect from the coalition negotiations, from Olaf Scholz perhaps, or from the new government as far as its policy on European integration in general is concerned. So our guest today is Oliver Lembcke, who is professor at the Ruhr University Bochum and an expert on electoral law, constitutional politics, and party politics. Welcome, Professor Lembcke.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I think that the audience is quite aware of the results of the German elections, so we don't want to waste time with presenting the results. And that's why I would start with a question on the phenomenon of the fragmentation and the leveling of the German party system. So what do you mean, which factors led to the fragmentation and also to the leveling of the German party system? Because there are 6 parties now in the Bundestag, but there are no really big parties, so very popular parties in the sense. And so what is the reason behind that? What do you think?
Yeah, this is an absolutely correct observation, and I'm almost grateful that you bring it up because nobody really has talked about the fragmentation of the German party system. I tried to do that for quite some time, and I usually point to the fact that there's a nice index to measure fragmentation of party systems. It's the Laxo-Tagipera index. And it's useful for comparison. And in the particular case of Germany, if you use this index and apply it, then you see that, of course, in the beginning of the German party system, West German party system, the index was quite high. I mean, there were more than 10 parties in parliament. It was a high index. And it's noteworthy that the Laxo-Tagipera index is even higher now. Means it is something like close to 5. It was in 1949, long time ago, but now the index is even higher. It's 5.3, and this is not because there are more than 10 parties in parliament, but it's because all of these parties that are in parliament, like you pointed out, are basically kind of close to each other when it comes to the weight of their political power. So what we can observe is that we have a fragmentation of the German party system that results, at least superficially speaking, of the fact that smaller parties have become bigger and bigger parties have become smaller. So they close in, so to say. And that means that the German party system has transformed in its structure. It's not a moderate pluralist party system as it was for so long time. It is now, in terms of Sartori's typology, it is now a party system that is pluralist polarized. And we see that in some way because we have 2 camps, left and right. Usually politicians themselves don't really like to talk about left and right, but from a political science point of view, you have basically 2 camps, and then you have 2 parties close to the center, another set of parties close to the parties to the center, and then you have the fringe parties, so to say. And that, of course, can easily change the logic of the competition within such a party system, meaning that the fringe parties and also the parties in the middle, so to say, of each camp has an incentive to compete not for the voters in the center, but in each camp, and that usually goes along with becoming a more and more polarized party system. So I'm saying that yes, you're right. Your observation is absolutely correct. It has been fragmented. It has been substantially fragmented. I would even argue it has changed its structure and it has become a pluralist, polarized party system. And you have this fragmentation and polarization basically feeding each other, and maybe we haven't seen the end of it. Maybe it produces in itself now a logic of let even more competitors enter the party politics parliament.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting point, because you are arguing that the German politics is getting more and more polarized, but from a Hungarian perspective, for example, I would say that the German politics is rather consensus-oriented, still consensus-oriented. But you are arguing that it's getting more and more polarized, and it can lead to even that this consensus politics will break up. Actually, that's your argument. Did I understand it correctly?
Yeah, I think you see both, and both is connected. You see a consensus-oriented politics for the parties at the center. For instance, the Chancellor Merkel, her style was a depolarized party politics, basically. And the GroKo, as the default position of a coalition, so to say, in Germany, is also an expression of depolarization. So if you take the former big parties, which are not big that anymore, 20 plus something, if you just look at them, the tendencies of becoming more polarized is only true for the SPD, because underneath there is something going on in terms of their policy orientation. There's something going on that has shifted the party more to the left. In that sense, the Social Democrats have become more leftish, so to say, and let's say, for the sake of argument, more polarized. Yeah, but the core of the argument would be the center is still clinging to this kind of consensus orientation, but that is an incentive for the camps. And I'm not talking about the 3, 4, 5, and 6 parties in the camp, so to say, to become more polarized. To make a long story short, I think that Merkel's Christian Democrats have moved to the center, becoming less conservative, more liberal, more centrist, so to say, has certainly contributed to the emergence of a new party. I'm speaking now about the right-wing populist party, the AfD, which are to some extent not only a right-wing populist party, but also a national conservative party. And of course, it has also some resemblance of right-wing extremism. But I don't mean to dwell now on this. I'm just saying, so the shift of the of parties in the center, and they are depolarized and centrist and consensus-oriented politics, has contributed to the fragmentation and polarization in each camp. That would be my argument.
Well, if we are talking about the extremes a little bit, I was almost struck by the fact that Linke, the left party, could not pass really the 5% threshold. And they had luck, actually, that they won 3 single-member constituencies, and that's why they are in the Bundestag right now.
Yeah.
So, and also it struck me that it was not only the left party which could not pass this 5% threshold, but also several other parties, and altogether it made approximately 9% of the votes, which was lost. So I think these are also 2 interesting developments in the German politics. I thought that the Linke, the German, the left wing or the left party, has a so strong basis that they can. It's unimaginable that they can miss this 5% threshold. That's
a lot
one
of
thing.
Things were unimaginable.
And the other thing was that 9% of lost votes. So how do you see these 2 phenomena?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to comment on my statement. A lot of things were unimaginable. I mean, it was absolutely unimaginable for a German to see the CDU, the Christian Democrats, as a union falling down to 20-something percent of votes. This is really a memorable and almost historic loss. It's something that will keep the party busy for quite some time, and they should clearly try to analyze very carefully the reasons for that. And also unimaginable was that the Social Democrats, which were basically more or less for a longer time, it was the drama queen of German politics, and then it became almost a zombie party. Now is revitalized, so to say, and is actually gaining something like 10% points within few weeks, and is actually now the strongest party of the German party system. So summing up, I would say it was really unimaginable that this party system is so dynamic and fluid, and that the voters are so volatile. That's really, I mean, there are good reasons for all these dynamics and all these developments, but nevertheless, it's kind of really astonishing, let's say. Now, let me answer briefly your question with regard to the left. Yes, the left has a very strong a base in East Germany, and it was unimaginable in a way that it could lose out so easily. But it has basically done everything in a wrong way. First of all, it crawled internally for more than 2 years. It has become personal in many ways and very toxic. And that is, of course, always something that appalls voters, first thing. Then, and maybe structurally speaking, more importantly, they are not only in a very poor shape, but they also have competitors on the left and on the right. And I think the party is not fit enough to meet this kind of challenge. On the left, the Social Democrats have become, I already pointed to that, have become more leftish. That means that they become a real competitor in terms of fighting for the voters left to the center. And on the right, the AfD, the Alternative für Deutschland, the right-wing populists, have their own very strong base in East Germany. Why? Because they now can represent the people who are basically disappointed. Of course, I need to analyze this in more detail, but let's take this for a moment. People who are not very much inclined to the way politics plays out on the national level, who thinks that that East Germany is left behind and things like that, nowadays go to the AfD and feel represented through the AfD and not by the left anymore. So the left is basically now, in a very strange way, squeezed into a competition between strong competitors on the left that you could expect, but also strong competitors on the right. And for a long time, they haven't had any competitors, so to say, because the Social Democrats were trying to heal their wounds that they had inflicted on themselves because of the labor market reforms, so-called Hartz-Gesetz, laws, Hartz-Gesetze, Hartz-IV-Gesetz, and that was a symbol, so to say, of the unsolidarity of Social Democrats. Wer hat uns verraten? Sozialdemokraten. That's a usual saying in Germany, so to say, and so that was proof of it. And so the Social Democrats were really basically bleeding on the left side. And the left has gained from that, and for a long time they were basically secure with their strongholds and were an important factor in German politics because of their strong presence in East Germany. But that's gone. And now it's only Thuringia where they are in a coalition, and actually they have their prime minister Bodo Ramelow, and have still an amount of support, something around 30%, which is something. And Berlin, but apart from that, they're losing out almost everywhere. They lose out in the east parts of Germany, they lose out in the west parts of Germany. They now have switched or exchanged their party leadership. The new party leadership is not well known. It's not let's say it's not a powerful couple, two women. So that contributes to it. But I think the competition on the left and on the right being in a bad shape in itself, so to say, for the left, is the main reason why they are struggling. And it becomes dangerous. You pointed to it, to the fact that they did not meet the threshold of 5%. It becomes dangerous, and I would expect them to struggle even harder. And the future is unclear for the left.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting explanation, because you're arguing that the SPD moved more to the left.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they voted for a chancellor candidate who is not really a leftist one. I mean, Olaf Scholz was a financial minister in the last government, and he is certainly not the figurehead of the leftist side of the SPD.
So yes, I agree.
If Olaf Scholz will be the next chancellor, there is a little bit more likely than Armin Laschet to be the next chancellor, as far as I can judge it from Budapest. So if Olaf Scholz will be the next chancellor, he must struggle not only with the FDP and the Greens, but also he must struggle within his own party. So what does it mean for the coalition? Because it is first time that there will be three parties in the coalition for a long time, and a leader which has some tensions also within its own party. I mean, Olaf Scholz.
Yeah, I agree with you. Almost fully, I would say. Your remarks are very prudent and accurate. Let me start off by saying it's not so easy to read the mandate that the voters have given in this election to the parties, and it's not so easy to make sense of it. You could make an argument they want something new, but I would argue, yes, of course, but that's not really doesn't really come as a surprise, because we are in a post-Merkel era. So whatever it will be something new. It's another chancellor, and it's another way, another style, another policies, and so on. So arguing for there must be something new is more or less it's a common place. There will be something new. What? And I think in this situation, the voters opted much less than the Greens would argue for instance, or also the FDP would argue, the Liberals would argue for. They argue for Germany has to have a new start or a restart or something like that. And I think Scholz is actually the name, the face, and the person people decided to support him, because they see him as an insurance that this newness, that this new dawn, so to say, of things that we will see in Germany is not going to be so radical. So it's taking him is an insurance of maybe we need to change whatever, but it shouldn't be so drastic. It shouldn't be so radical like the Greens and others wanted to. And for that reason, that also explains, for instance, the poor result of the left. Also, the German voters in the post-Merkel era were not up to let's have a totally new kind of policies with the red-green coalition, but they wanted a moderate mixture of some new ideas in a setting that's pretty close not similar, but pretty close to the way Merkel did it. Maybe not many people would say what actually admit that, but I think that is at least my reading of the election, of the result. And he impersonates perfectly this kind of calm and collected figure that incrementally, moderately, so to say, does politics. And what made him so, let's say, different from the other candidates were weak. Baerbock is a weak candidate, started out carried away by a media hype, but then did a lot of mistakes, all by herself, maybe not, but a lot by herself, and was a weak candidate, ended up being a weak candidate, and is now almost at the verge of being second place, and the frontman is again Habeck. In terms of the Greens. And Laschet, well, that's a non-starter. I mean, everybody was waiting for Laschet, but Laschet never came. He never delivered. Laschet was, he thought to be the prime minister of North Rhine-Westphalia, biggest country in Germany, Bundesland in Germany. So he knows how to do it. He doesn't know anything. He doesn't know how to do a campaign, at least an election campaign. He was a non-starter and failed miserably. And compared to them, Scholz was supported by his party because they at least were disciplined and gave him the floor. They gave him the floor knowing if we succeed, we can afterwards maybe get our own share by pushing through more leftish policies than Scholz actually stands for. You're absolutely correct. He's the man of the center. He's not a leftist. He's not and of course not a real radical leftish politician at all. And what comes more to it is that he is, people say that he's boring, and in a way he is boring. A lot of politicians are boring, but he has now sort of performed as, so to say, tongue-in-cheek, portraying himself as the robot Scholz-o-mat. But it's self-irony, and self-irony plays nicely out usually. Yeah, if someone understands I'm not really a rock star, that helps, and it helps for him to say I'm a Scholz-o-mat and ich bin ein bisschen langsam and so on and so on. And people like that he seems to know that he's not entertaining, and by that is entertaining. So that, I think, adds up to why he as a person has contributed a lot to the victory of his party. His party must know that the victory, they own, so to say, the victory to him, but that will not mean that the Social Democrats on the left, so to say, eager to push the new reforms through parliament, will actually restrict themselves. They now see this as the great chance, and this is the question: what can we expect from Scholz? I mean, I think we can expect from Scholz that he becomes a moderator of a very complicated three-party coalition, and as you rightly pointed out, the coalition relationship between the Greens and the Liberals is awkward. I mean, whatever they say, but it's really, they are worlds apart. And this is also true for many things between the Greens and Scholz, but not between the Greens and the Social Democrat Party. So there are a lot of tensions, a lot of conflict lines within, so to say, these coalition, and also within, absolutely correct, within the German SPD or Social Democrats, and you can count until 10, and it will show.
Do you expect that perhaps these coalition negotiations will once again break up like the last time at the election or after the election in 2017, or it's not the same situation? So at that time, the FDP broke up the coalition negotiations, and then once again the GroKo came. I mean, the SPD and the CDU.
Yeah, it's always difficult to predict things, especially if they concern the future. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. They are so hopeful. At least they portray themselves of being so hopeful, and they all plays out nicely for the so-called Ampel. means Social Democrats in coalition with the Greens and the Liberals. I don't know, but I don't think that's going to be easy. It's going to be a very rocky road, and that is also true for the alternative. Jamaica means that would mean from the point of nowadays of today would mean Laschet as a chancellor, very weak chancellor, together with the Greens and the Liberals, because these alternatives, the one seems to be very promising, the other seems to be plan B, are somewhat unlikely if you take a closer look at the policy orientation. Maybe we are up for next round of GroKo. That means the Great Coalition, uncalled, between the Social Democrats and Christian Democrats. Nobody wants that. Everybody is trying to say, "Oh, we are done by Christmas." But I think what we see at Christmas is Santa Claus, and you can believe in that, so to say. I don't believe it at all that they are done by Christmas. I believe everybody is talking with everybody, and the longer it endures, the more they actually face that now parties come together, especially the Greens and the Liberals, which have a hard time to compromise on a lot of things. And that means for the Chancellor, for Olaf Scholz, basically, he can only be a moderator, and that, of course, will very much disappoint his leftish base. And also for that reason, I assume that he's going to have a very difficult job if he actually succeeds. Not only winning the election, that's nice, but also getting elected as the Chancellor of Germany. Let's see. I think it's a very, very open game, judging from now.
All right, and then a last question on the possible policies of the new government, which we still don't know which will be. I mean, which coalition. But what do you think on the future governance policy on European integration? There will be not big debates, as far as I can remember, during the election campaign on Europe. Which is an interesting point because, some would argue that what happens in Germany, that will happen also in Europe to some extent. So Germany has also, always a decisive role in deciding what happens in Europe. So if there were no discussion in Europe, what will happen with Europe after the new government has been installed?
Again, a very nice and accurate observation, I think. During the election campaigns, Europe was not a big issue. And judging from now, the most likely coalition, let's say, the coalition between the Social Democrats, Greens, and Liberals, they have a consensus about Europe. But I think the consensus is only we are pro-Europe and keep it up like the way it was. And so that's a strange attitude, because they are combined, because they are the forces who actually want to change the policy orientation in Germany. So nationally, they want to have a new start. But in terms of Europe, I think they are just a fade copy, so to say, of Merkel, and basically the idea is to keep it up. But in terms of the challenges Europe is facing, in Germany and in particular in its European context, so to say, is facing, I think keep it up is just not is just the wrong choice, so to say. They need to come up with new impulses. They need to come up with thinking through challenges which are out there. I would agree, Europe was not a big issue, but that is something that scares me in some way. What about the EU relation and in the German relation towards Russia, China, and the United States? And in this respect, I don't even believe that the three of them pro-Europe consensus parties have a consensus in this respect. I don't believe that they have a consensus in terms of the relation we Germans and the EU should have to Russia, China, and the United States. So that means they don't even have an idea about the framework of a common European security policy, which is really a necessary thing to think about. And maybe even for the sake of argument, because of Brexit. I mean, once the British are out, we need to really rethink the relationship between the EU and NATO and the EU security policy and what kind of contribution can we bring to the table and so on and so forth. Nothing of that has been discussed, and nothing of that is covered by this more or less lame and in some respect even fragile consensus on let's keep it up in Europe as it is. That's not enough, and it's and when it comes to international politics, it's even worse. I don't see this coalition. I don't see a strong chancellor to start with, because it's a moderator of a difficult three-party coalition to start with, so to say. But I don't see the Germans in the pole position of at least having an answer to Macron's idea or having an own vision of it, so to say. And I think that Germany's role will decline in terms of European leadership. And I don't expect them to come up with a new foreign policy agenda, which would be necessary. And I see them most likely quarrel about the role of realism and realist approach towards international politics in Europe. And I don't see the three parties being fit for that at all. So when it comes to that, I think lessons need to be learned in a very quick way. And if we actually have the personnel and the parties, if they have the willingness to face the challenge, to accept the challenge, and to do something about it, I don't know. They are more or less really stuck with the idea that they need to have national reforms. This is a national government oriented to some big problems of the national, so to say, contribution to climate change, managing climate change, doing something about housing in big cities, and so on and so forth. I fear that you and me and Europeans cannot expect too much from the next German administration, the German chancellor or government, in terms of, hey, listen, what are we going to do with Europe within the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years? And what should our relations be to our neighbors, which happen to be our partners or enemies? And we need to think about, so to say, how to build up relationships, and what do we do with the three bullies on the international scene and so on. I don't see any politician being capable of making worthy contributions in that respect. And that's I hate to end on a not so nice note, but I really that's what I fear the worst, that nothing will come out of Germany within the next years, because we are very much concerned with ourselves.
All right, so these are perhaps not very nice words, but perhaps more realistic analysis of what happened and what will perhaps happen in the next times after the German election. Professor Lembcke, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
We are very pleased that you were there. This was the MCC Votes and Seats podcast on the German election. I was Kaman Póca from the Center for Constitutional Politics of the MCC. Thank you once again.